Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Ashley Martella. Joining us is U.S. Representative Adam Putnam, Republican representing Florida's 12th Congressional District. He's also a candidate in the race for Commissioner of Florida's Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services and was just endorsed by former Florida Governor Jeb Bush. Representative Putnam has been a U.S. representative since 2001, when at the age of 26, he became one of the youngest members of Congress in history. He served in his party's leadership as a member of the Committee on Financial Services, which oversees all components of the nation's housing and financial services sectors. For the 110th Congress, Adam's peers selected him to be chairman of the Republican Conference, his party's third highest leadership post. Welcome to Newsmax TV, Representative Putnam.
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Like every Republican, you voted no on Obamacare, the health reform bill. Talk to us about why you think the Democrats' overhaul was such a bad idea.
Well, you know, I think everyone can agree that there are things that we can do better in America to improve access to care and, most importantly, to lower the healthcare costs, controlling the costs of defensive medicine, letting people buy insurance across state lines, letting small businesses pool together and purchase coverage and maximize the leverage that would come from that. But what the president and what Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi put forward really fundamentally realigns the relationship between government and its people. For the first time, it will force you to take on additional costs in your life just for being, not for buying something, not for selling something, not for being in a particular occupation, but just for living. There will be a tax on that. They really are fundamentally intervening with government in that relationship between a doctor and the patient. And I think that we're seeing the resentment and the anxiety and the anger grow by the day as people learn more and more about what was in that 2,400-page bill.
We know something that was not in it is tort reform. And also, aren't there some constitutional questions, particularly about the mandated insurance purchase?
There are. There's really two key questions that the attorneys general from around the country are basing their lawsuits on. The first is this mandate to purchase coverage. Again, it's a tax on being. And I think that that particular constitutional question is certainly worthy of the court's review, and I think it should go to the highest court in the land for review. The second is a 10th Amendment issue, and this question of whether they are usurping states' rights in this mandate and in this new requirement. And both of those questions are certainly bound for the courtrooms, and it's good to see such a cross-section, in fact, a bipartisan cross-section of attorneys general from around the country challenging this new law.
Including Florida.
Frankly, led by Florida's Attorney General Bill McCollum.
A growing number of Americans feel that Congress is out of touch, and approval ratings for Congress are at an all-time low. As a member of Congress yourself, where do you think you guys are going wrong?
Well, you know, who could blame the American people for seeing a Congress that's out of touch when a vast majority of Americans were opposed to Obama's health care plan, and yet it passed anyway. They're opposed to the cap and trade scheme, and yet they've signaled that they intend to take that up. They've signaled that they intend to move with potentially an amnesty-based immigration bill. So who could fault the American people for being frustrated with an out-of-touch Congress? And that's before we get into the scandals that have been rolling out of the Congress drip by drip. A poll came out recently that actually showed that congressional approval ratings today, here in March, are at the same place that they were at Halloween of 1994. Just before the wave election and the Republican Revolution. So it's really a telling sign that here in the spring of the election year, not in late summer, not in fall, but in the spring of the election year, we're seeing record low approval ratings and frankly record participation among the electorate of people showing up at town hall meetings, making their voices heard, and in many cases actually running for office who never would have contemplated in the past.
All right, you made a decision to leave Congress, where you were very well respected by members of your own party, to run for a state position, the Department of Agriculture Commissioner. Why you want to do that? Why?
Well, you know, as I told a preacher the other day, I had to get out of Washington while my soul was still intact. But, you know, as a conservative, I believe that really the states are our laboratories of democracy. If you're someone who's in public service to craft solutions and solve problems that people are facing in this complicated world, the states are really where the solutions come from. When you think of Washington, a lot of adjectives come to mind, but innovation, creativity, and solutions aren't among them. States solved welfare reform first. States will solve the health care issues, I think, more creatively and more effectively because they're closer to the people. States balance their budgets. And so really, in terms of meeting the needs of the people today, states are really where the engines of innovation are. And so the opportunity to run statewide, to be one of 4 statewide elected officials in Florida and sit on Florida's cabinet, as opposed to being one of 435, I believe gives me an opportunity to be more of an impact player for the state that I love. Florida's cabinet is sort of an odd creature of Reconstruction, where it's actually power sharing, and it's the board of directors of the 4th largest state, where the ag commissioner, the attorney general, the chief financial officer, and the governor all have one vote and collectively regulate banks and utilities and insurance companies and public lands and highway patrol and things of that sort. So in addition to the portfolio of agriculture and the portfolio of consumer services, it's really the board of directors of Florida.
What qualities in particular do you think you would bring to the table?
Well, first and foremost, someone who's Commissioner of Agriculture ought to know something about agriculture. It's in my DNA. Before I was in the Congress, I was in the citrus and cattle business. My family is still in the citrus and cattle business. I'm a 5th generation Floridian in agriculture, and I know what it is to have your livelihood rise or fall with a thermometer or a rain gauge. And so you really need to have that base credibility, I believe, to be Commissioner of Agriculture. But then beyond that, have a vision for Florida. And Florida is well positioned to come out of this recession stronger than we went into it, more diverse than just being reliant on agriculture, tourism, and residential construction for the pillars of our economy, well positioned to frankly capitalize on other states' weaknesses. I'd rather be Florida than Michigan. I'd rather be Florida than Ohio or California or New Jersey 6 months from now or 6 years from now in terms of being a center of job creation, innovation, drawing the most talented faculty members from around the country, being a magnet for laboratories of research and development, corporate headquarters. That's where I see Florida going, and as a member of that cabinet, that's where I'd like to guide us.
As Agriculture Commissioner, you likely work with the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, and there are some who are saying now Obama is trying to politicize the EPA to ram through his cap and trade legislation because it seems stalled in the Senate. Now, the fact he may use EPA to implement cap and trade, does that alarm you?
It should alarm every American. There's no question that they have really put a highly charged political atmosphere in places like the Department of Labor with card check, and in places like the EPA when it comes to new water policies, sidestepping congressional input on policies involving regulating carbon dioxide. They are attempting to regulate what they cannot legislate. And that is a tremendous arrogance of power that every American should be concerned about when your elected officials, your elected representatives in the Congress, are being given an end run and having unelected bureaucrats transform the economy, export jobs by adopting these new regulations that makes America non-competitive relative to the rest of the world.
If energy legislation eventually does pass that contains some form of cap and trade or cap and tax, as you Republicans like to call it, what would be the major consequences of that?
Well, aside from the erosion of the constitutional power of the legislative branch and the fact that there is this usurpation of power, the chief outcome will be that we continue the loss of good manufacturing jobs in America. We will export the very jobs that still build things and create things and make tangible items. And if this financial crisis has taught us anything, America has to remain an economy that still builds and creates and innovates. It's not enough simply to trade paper and be a service-based economy. That's an important component of a balanced economy, but it has to remain balanced. And when you have the EPA adopting standards that cannot be attained and will result in further erosion of our manufacturing base and jobs moving overseas and costs going up for our consumers for their light bills, their fuel bills, heating their homes, cooling their homes, in a time when people are strapped for cash, it's just frightening to consider the ripple effect of that policy.
Representative Adam Putnam, thank you so much for joining us
It's a
here at
pleasure to be
Newsmax.
with you.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.
Sarah Palin's new book, Going Rogue in American Life, will be released on November 17th. You can be among the first to get your copy. Check out our incredible free offer for Sarah's new book. Just go to Newsmax.com and click on the top banner for this great offer. Act today.